The morning light filters through the blinds of Mark's modest apartment, casting long, thin shadows across a kitchen counter cluttered with gadgets. Mark is the quintessential face of the modern American middle class, a man whose life is a testament to the efficiency and ease of the digital age. He wakes up to a curated playlist from a music service he's used for years, brews coffee from a machine that automatically reorders pods via an integrated app, and checks the news on a tablet powered by a high-tier digital news subscription. To the outside observer, Mark's life is one of seamless luxury, a world where every need is anticipated and every desire is just a click away. However, beneath this polished surface, a silent financial crisis is brewing, one that is not defined by a single catastrophic event, but by the relentless, quiet accumulation of hidden monthly costs that have slowly woven themselves into the fabric of his existence. It started years ago with the seductive promise of convenience. Like millions of others, Mark was drawn into the burgeoning subscription model because it felt like a bargain. Why pay $30 for a single DVD when you could pay $10 a month for 10,000 movies? Why buy a single album when the world's entire library of music was available for the price of a fancy sandwich? These were the affordable luxuries that made life feel modern and elevated. Soon the model expanded beyond entertainment. There was the gym membership that promised a new physique, the meal kit service that claimed to save time on grocery shopping, and the specialized software for his photography hobby that used to cost hundreds up front but was now only $20 a month. In those early days, each new subscription felt like a small win, a way to access high-quality products without the burden of a massive initial investment. It was a lifestyle powered by the philosophy of access over ownership, but as the months turned into years, the convenience began to curdle into a suffocating weight. This is what financial experts call death by 1,000 cuts. For Mark, it isn't one large bill that keeps him up at night, it is the dozens of small, seemingly insignificant charges that populate his bank statement. A $9 fee for a storage upgrade, a $15 charge for an ad-free video experience, a $12 payment for a meditation app he hasn't opened since January. Individually, they are trivial. Collectively, they form a massive, unmanageable monthly drain that consumes a staggering percentage of his take-home pay. He watches as his paycheck, which once felt substantial, vanishes into a digital abyss before he even has a chance to pay his rent or buy a week's worth of groceries. The automated nature of these payments makes them invisible until the moment the balance hits zero, leaving him wondering where all the money went. The conflict intensified as the broader economy began to shift. Mark noticed a painful gap widening between his steady, stagnating wages and the skyrocketing costs of basic necessities. Every time he visits the grocery store, he feels a pang of genuine shock at the price of eggs, milk, and bread. His utility bills have climbed steadily, and the cost of maintaining his car has surged. In this climate of persistent inflation, the convenience of his subscriptions has transformed into a predatory burden. There is a deep, gnawing anxiety that comes with looking at a bank statement and seeing money disappear in real time, siphoned off by companies that provide services he no longer values or even uses. He feels trapped in a cycle of automated consumption, a passenger in his own financial life, watching his sovereignty erode one auto-renew at a time. This shift was no accident. It was the result of a massive pivot in the global economy, where corporations moved from a one-time sale model to the subscription economy. Companies realized that if they could hook a consumer on a recurring fee, they could ensure a lifetime of predictable revenue. They stopped selling tools and started selling licenses to use those tools. It was a brilliant move for the bottom line of tech giants, but for consumers like Mark, it meant the end of true ownership. He realized that if he stopped paying, his digital life, his photos, his projects, his entertainment would simply vanish. The psychological toll of this rental everything lifestyle began to weigh on him, creating a sense of instability and perpetual debt that no amount of digital content could soothe. One evening, fueled by a mixture of frustration and a need for clarity, Mark sits down to audit his accounts. As he scrolls through the endless list of transactions, his heart hammers against his ribs. He sees the usual suspects, but then his eyes fixate on a charge for a premium productivity suite he hasn't accessed in over 6 months. He had forgotten it even existed, yet it has been quietly taking $30 from him every single month like a digital parasite. Before we continue, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. The realization is a sharp, cold blade in his chest. This isn't just a minor oversight, it is a symptom of a deeper rot. He stares at the screen, a sense of cold fury replacing his anxiety. His His digital life is bleeding him dry, and he finally understands that the only way to survive is to start cutting back. This single, forgotten charge is just the tip of an iceberg that is about to sink his financial ship, and the fight to reclaim his bank account has only just begun. Mark stared at the glowing screen, his finger hovering over the mouse. He had finally found the cancellation page for the productivity suite, but it was buried under 4 layers of submenus and intentionally confusing labels. This was no accident. It was a deliberate design choice known in the industry as a dark pattern. The interface was a digital labyrinth crafted by highly paid psychologists and engineers to exploit human hesitation. The cancel button was small, translucent, and tucked away in a corner, while the stay subscribed button was a vibrant, welcoming green. As he clicked the link, a series of guilt-tripping pop-up windows appeared. One showed a sad-looking illustration of a cloud with a face, asking him if he really wanted to delete his memories. Another listed every single feature he would lose, framing the cancellation not as a financial saving, but as a tragic personal loss. Mark felt a surge of irritation. The very service that claimed to simplify his life was now holding his data hostage, using emotional manipulation to keep its hand in his pocket. The process only became more grueling from there. Before the cancellation could be finalized, a chat window snapped open, connecting him to a retention specialist named Sarah. Though her tone was polite, her words followed a rigid, predatory script. She offered him a discounted rate for 3 months, then a loyalty credit, and finally asked him to explain, in detail, why he no longer valued their partnership. Every response Mark gave was met with a prepackaged counter-argument. It was a psychological war of attrition. The company wasn't just selling a product anymore, they were defending a recurring revenue stream at all costs. Mark realized that his relationship with these corporations had become parasitic. They didn't want satisfied customers. They wanted complacent victims who were too exhausted by the cancellation process to actually leave. He was witnessing the ugly underbelly of the subscription economy, where the ease of entry was matched only by the sheer difficulty of exit. This frustration wasn't unique to Mark. Across the United States, a massive macroeconomic shift was reaching a fever pitch. Millions of Americans were simultaneously hitting what economists called the subscription breaking point. For years, people had tolerated the creep of monthly fees because the economy felt stable enough to absorb them, but with persistent inflation driving the cost of eggs, fuel, and rent to historic highs, the math no longer worked. The average American household had unknowingly accumulated over 10 different subscriptions, many of which had quietly raised their prices over the last year. Mark looked at his own spreadsheet and saw the pattern clearly. A streaming service that started at $8 was now $16. A music app had jumped from $10 to $15. And the worst part was the broken promise. Services that were originally sold as ad-free were now introducing basic tiers with commercials, effectively forcing users to pay more just to maintain the experience they already had. The tension was palpable. Mark found himself standing in front of his open refrigerator, debating whether he could afford the high-quality protein he liked, while his phone pinged with a notification that his cloud storage payment had just been processed. It was a zero-sum game. Every dollar sent to a tech giant in Silicon Valley was a dollar taken away from his actual physical survival. The escape offered by his streaming platforms was becoming less appealing when the reality of his rising utility bills was staring him in the face. Corporate greed had overreached, assuming that the American consumer would simply keep paying forever out of habit. But habit was no match for a shrinking bank balance. Seeking clarity, Mark turned to the digital world that had trapped him, but this time he looked for a way out. He discovered a burgeoning online community on forums and social media dedicated to the great unsubscribe. Thousands of people were sharing elaborate tutorials on how to bypass dark patterns, providing direct links to hidden cancellation pages, and offering budgeting hacks to replace expensive services with free alternatives. He saw stories of families who had reclaimed hundreds of dollars a month just by being ruthless with their digital footprints. This was a movement born of necessity, a collective rejection of the rental everything lifestyle that had been pushed upon them. Finally, Mark sat back and did the final calculation, his eyes widening as the numbers appeared on the screen. When he added up every single recurring charge, the apps, the entertainment, the convenience fees, and the premium memberships, the total was staggering. He was spending nearly $5,000 a year on services he barely used. That was money that could have gone toward his retirement, a down payment, or even just a sense of security. The revelation hit him like a physical blow. He wasn't just paying for convenience, he was paying for a digital cage. The realization was sharp and final. The era of automated consumption had to end tonight. Mark didn't hesitate anymore. He sat at his kitchen table, the blue light of his laptop illuminating a face set with grim determination. One by one, he opened the tabs. A firing squad of cancellation pages. Click, confirm. No, I don't want a discount. Click, confirm. No, I don't care about the loyalty rewards. It was a digital purge. He felt a phantom weight lifting from his shoulders with every confirmation email that flooded his inbox. Your subscription has been canceled. To Mark, it was the most beautiful sentence he had read in years. By midnight, the purge was complete. He had reclaimed nearly $400 a month of his own hard-earned vital labor. He was finally breathing again. The first week of this new reality was the hardest, testing his resolve. This was where the fear of missing out, that jagged, modern anxiety, began to claw at his mind. He stood on the periphery of social circles, a digital ghost wandering the halls of conversations about trending shows he could no longer join. On social media, targeted ads mocked him, teasing essential updates for software he had discarded. The automated convenience he once leaned on was gone, replaced by the friction of manual living. He had to research recipes instead of having a pre-portioned meal kit arrive at his door. He had to manually choose a playlist instead of letting a mathematical algorithm curate his morning. But then, the psychological tide began to turn, and the friction transformed into power. The silence of his phone, once deafening, became a sanctuary. Without the constant manipulative pinging of new arrivals, Mark found something he hadn't truly possessed in a decade, his own attention. His focus returned. And when the first of the month finally rolled around, the real miracle happened. He checked his bank balance with the usual sense of impending dread, only to see the number remain steady. This time, the money stayed. It was a stagnant pool of security rather than a leaking faucet of debt. He felt a profound sense of sovereignty. He was no longer a host for corporate parasites. He was finally the master of his resources. Mark was not an isolated case. Across the United States, a massive movement was taking hold. The Great Unsubscribe was no longer just a trend. It was a brutal market correction. The tech giants, accustomed to the infinite growth of subscription models, began to spiral into panic. Their quarterly reports showed plateauing numbers and surging churn rates that no amount of dark patterns could stop. Forced to pivot, some companies began to offer pay-per-use models or brought back perpetual licenses to regain a sliver of trust. The era of blind loyalty had been replaced by a fierce protective skepticism. Mark's daily life shifted from the digital and ephemeral to the tangible. He started buying physical books from local shops, relishing the fact that no corporation could remotely delete them from his shelf. He bought a vintage turntable and carefully selected vinyl records, preferring to own the music he loved rather than renting a temporary license to hear it. He transitioned from being a passive consumer to an intentional owner. He embraced minimalist finance, a philosophy where every dollar spent was a conscious vote for his own values, not an automated tribute to a Silicon Valley server farm. As the sun rose on a quiet Saturday morning, Mark sat on his porch with a simple cup of coffee, watching the world wake up without the urge to check a screen. He didn't feel the need to scroll through a feed or catch up on a trending show. He had his time back. He had his money back. The grand cultural experiment of owning nothing and being happy was facing its final collapse. Americans like Mark were realizing that true happiness didn't come from a curated stream of digital noise, but from the quiet confidence of financial independence. The era of the digital parasite was ending, replaced by a hard-won realization that in a world designed to drain you, the most valuable thing you can ever truly own